Welcome to this episode of our podcast, Fear Less, Do More. Today, I'm joined by Helen Taylor, an architect and director at Scott Brownrigg. Helen's going to take us through her journey to becoming an architect and also through very changing times for her industry and for the built environment generally. It impacts on all of us, the places we work, we live, we play. So I'm looking forward to hearing Helen's take on the world around us and how architecture has impacted all of us. Helen, welcome. Thanks for joining me today. It's always good to have a fellow professional services person on. There are a lot of misconceptions about us and about, generally, I find people think you're either boring or won't have anything that will relate to them, but that's certainly not the case with you. And actually what you do, people are a lot more interested in than law. So you're an architect.
I am, yes.
And but you have quite a broad career.
Yeah.
And I think people will find that really interesting. So let's start at the beginning. How did you end up getting into architecture?
How did I get into architecture? I think it wasn't a kind of straightforward journey. I think I was really interested. I really enjoyed art and maths at school. So it's kind of like, well, what can you do with those two things? I had a grandfather I was very close to who worked in construction as a mechanical electrical engineer. And he very much encouraged me to, get a trade, get a vocation. So, and I think also my parents were really interested in history and buildings. So, I was taken around lots of National Trust visits and things like that as a child. So I was interested in the environment around me. And I thought it would be an interesting thing to study. So I went into it really with a very open mind, not really knowing what to expect. And I think that's been one of the reasons that I've had, tried lots of different things in my career and gone in lots of different directions. And actually, that's one of the fantastic things about architecture. It gives you it's a really interesting degree to do at university. It's a really interesting profession, but also it can take you in lots of different directions.
So it's about the built environment.
It's about design. Absolutely.
But is it about the form or the function?
Oh, whoa, that's a good question.
Sorry, a bit of a philosophical question to start things off.
That's a really important question. And actually, obviously, at the moment, the construction industry is, really in the headlines because of the Grenfell inquiry and everything that's come out about that over the last few years. And I think sometimes we forget that fundamentally, what it's about is function. Obviously, it's about the function of the built environment, creating a physical space that we can all live in healthily and safely. But it's also about, hopefully, beauty and joy and creating a space that inspires us and makes us feel good and allows us to achieve, our ambitions and the things we would like to do. And I think sometimes we push in one direction more than another, and that's always a bit of a push and pull. But I think also, an individual building, which is quite often what we're working on, and it might only be a part of a building, it might be an existing building, it might be a new building, it might be a whole new area of a town. That is only part of the bigger picture. So I think we're getting much better as an industry about understanding the connections between the individual projects that we do and the bigger picture about what the impact on the physical environment, the natural environment as well, obviously really important, and on people. What's the impact of this project going to have, this building going to have on the people who are there, on the people who might be there in the future. So it potentially has a huge impact. And I think you see that with students in schools of architecture, that they really want to make a difference. That a lot of them go into it because they understand that architecture can make a difference and can actually really improve people's lives, and they want to help, they want to give back.
So when you look back in history, do you have a sort of a favourite period or style of architecture that you think that the industry really hit the nail on the head there at that particular time?
I mean, the things I'm often quite drawn to are less, I guess a little bit style. So quite often when you talk about architecture, people think about style straight away, and it isn't always about style. I think the things I was probably drawn to when I was younger were, quite ancient buildings and simple buildings. So, cathedrals where you would have, an amazing impact on you going into a really big voluminous space where, you'd have the incredibly solid materials and the sound would change and the temperature would change, and you have a real kind of physical sensory experience. I think that kind of thing where it's quite a tactile sensory experience is what really appeals to me. So probably quite, I'm really drawn to, old cathedrals and things like that, but probably in the 20th century, architects like Frank Lloyd Wright, and then more in more recent years, architects like Zaha Hadid, who was doing really pushing the boundaries of what we could design in terms of using digital skills, using 3D technology, and also because there haven't been that many. There's not that many famous architects, to be honest. If you asked somebody who list a name of architects, they would probably struggle after kind of Christopher Wren and Norman Foster.
Yeah.
And certainly if you ask them about female architects, they would probably draw a blank. There's very few that have really kind of got their heads above the parapet and got any kind of awareness about what they do and the impact they have. And I think it's not about being famous, of course, but actually I think it just shows that sometimes what we do is really under the radar.
So obviously you're a female architect. Has the profession changed in that way?
I think it really has changed, and hopefully changed for the better. So I graduated from my first degree in architecture in the early 90s. I had a job in my year out before I went to university, and also when I graduated in the early 90s, there wasn't any work actually, and that is one of the issues that architecture has, is that it's a long course. It takes a long time to get qualified, and we're very much impacted by economic cycles. So I happened to come out at a point in the cycle where there wasn't a lot of work, but essentially that at that point in time, architectural practice was still very analog. It was drawing boards, it was rulers, pencils. And so that's the way I learned, was quite a kind of physical connection with drawings and with sketching and with using a drawing board. And it was all very kind of regimented. And I do remember, coming in the morning in my year out job, and the architects would come in and open their post. And if there was something really important, they might have a phone call or even a fax, that would be really urgent. They would, might have to deal with some site queries and things like that. And then we'd spend the afternoon drawing, it was completely different. Now everything is digital, everything is online. We design pretty much completely in a digital 3-dimensional environment using digital technology. Everything we create is shared with other consultants on the team. So we're always collaborating with, whether it's with engineers, specialist consultants, fire engineers. And we have that ability now to share information in a live environment. So it's, that side of things has completely changed. I think the other thing that's quite different is just the visibility of women, and more diversity generally actually across the industry. It's definitely not kind of, solved, but it's definitely better than it was. And I think partly that was because it's always been quite a difficult industry, I think, to stay in and to kind of maintain a career in, and partly because of this economic cycle we're impacted by. So we have these points every now and again where if you can't get a job or you lose your job, it's quite hard to get back into it, or things happen, you become a parent, you take time out. And there's been a kind of general culture of small practices and small businesses. So that hasn't helped us kind of build a really good foundation to help that diversity really flourish. So I think we're getting better. It's part of it is just, we're learning as we go forward. The more of us in it, the better we get. And the thing I really notice now, which is really nice, is that when I go to a meeting, I'm not the only woman there. There are women engineers, there are lots of women clients, there are women lawyers, there are lots more women working for contractors, directly in the construction industry on site. Still don't see very many women tradespersons. So, I think I met one woman scaffolder ever. Things like that I think are still seen as very much a kind of male area of work. But I think all of that is changing, and all of that is open to change. And I think anybody should see it as an interesting career, because there's so many different things that you could do in the construction industry.
A lot of that resonates with me because it's very, very similar in the legal profession. Traditionally lacking in diversity, particularly at a senior level, but also the impact of technology, which completely I remember when we got PCs for the first time in the late 90s, just an email, you know, not having to send things in the post or wait for it to scroll off from a fax machine, completely changed the industry. And I think, you know, architecture now to me is all about, you know, I don't, when I picture an architect, I don't picture somebody with a pencil and a ruler anymore. I picture somebody with a CAD package or whatever it happens to be. So do you have to look for different skills now in architects when they're coming through?
Yes and no. I think one of the biggest challenges for the next generation is that we're expecting them, and we need them to still have those core skills. We still need them to understand the basics of design, the basics of how a building goes together, you know, understanding materials, thinking about scale, thinking about process, that, you know, all of that you still need. But then you've also got this whole other layer of, oh, by the way, you need to know all this software and how to, you know, and I think that is quite challenging. And the jump between academia and practice has always been, you know, a bit of a jolt, and some people find that really hard. Some people come into practice after they do their first degree and just never go back. So like, I really like it in practice, that academia stuff's weird. Other people get vice versa, they find practice really difficult. So we're doing more and more now to try and help ease students and graduates into the profession by, you know, we've been doing things like, recently we did a digital boot camp, so two weeks where we just invited a bunch of students to come in and understand, right, this is the software we use, this is how we use it, this is what you know, this is the kind of process that we go through in practice. And I think that, you know, it's really challenging. I mean, and we're lucky, we're a big enough practice that we can do things like that, and we've got good connections with the universities, and students are amazing. I mean, I'm still just blown away every single CV and portfolio I ever see. I'm just blown away by the quality of love, care, interest, passion, talent that goes in there. I wish I could give every single student an opportunity.
As you said, there was, I mean, such a long route.
Yeah.
Was it 7 years?
7 years minimum. Yeah.
Why does it need to take that long?
Yeah, that's another comment. That's a long conversation. So I think there are good reasons in some way, in that there's a lot to learn, and having, you know, we debate this in practice sometimes because we don't always agree on, you know, is there a best route, and, you know, what bit's important. There's a lot to get your head around just about the principles of design and designing a building. There's a lot to learn in terms of how to operate in practice. And we've kind of developed this route over the years, which the RIBA, the Royal Institute of British Architects, kind of put in place over time. And then in the 1980s, the Architects Registration Board came into place. So this is now the register. So anybody that wants to call themselves an architect has to be on this register of architects. And there's obviously minimum standards that the ARB are looking to achieve. So now basically the ARB are setting the criteria for how long it takes and what you need to do. There is change afoot, and partly that's because the cost of studying is so massive, and I do really worry about the debt that architecture students come out with, and we're not a particularly high-paying profession, I would say. So, you know, that balance between the cost of study versus actually the rewards, I don't think is quite right anymore. And also, we've been unable to change things because essentially post-Brexit, ARB weren't allowed to change anything for a while because there were lots of decisions that had to be made. And now post-Grenfell, there is quite a lot of change happening. So I think that 7 years will change, and there'll be more flexibility built in there. In the meantime, we've also set up an apprenticeship program as well for architects, and you can do that in a minimum roughly of 8 years. So there's different routes in that are addressing the debt issue, but I think there's still quite a lot to do to address the time issue. And if you study in Spain or other parts of the world, you can call yourself an architect after 5 years. And, you know, so there's lots of different ways and lots of different kind of strengths and weaknesses of different ways of studying in different countries. But one great thing about it is really portable. So, I mean, if you do qualify as an architect anywhere in the world, that is a really portable qualification, portable skill that you can use anywhere in the world. Not like yeah, I mean, there's still local regulations, obviously, that you need, but the principles, I think, can apply everywhere, which is great.
And as the apprenticeship model, have employers embraced that, or is it still early days?
I think it's still early days. So it has been in place since 2018 now. Obviously, we had a few challenges over the last few years with COVID and lockdowns, and I think the biggest challenge has been getting the academic world to adopt the programme and to deliver the right quality of education, because delivering your academic requirements still needs to be done through an academic route. We as a practice, we've got lots of knowledge, skills and experience, but we can't get any kind of credits for that. We can't give any credits for that in practice. So the academic part of the study is still really, really important. And I think a lot of practices are nervous about taking on graduates because they worry about it being a long-term commitment. They worry about being able to support them appropriately. And it's just unfamiliar still. We're all used to taking on graduates. That's quite normal. And that's, the kind of what we benefited from as individuals in the past to get where we are today. But taking on apprentices, that's slightly different things. So there are opportunities, and there are quite a few practices who are doing it, but it would be great to have more practices and to build on that, because I think the demand is there from young people. There's a lot of interest in studying and qualifying through that route.
So you've obviously been a great role model for I mean, I'm talking as if your career's over. Yeah. So, you are. Not that you have been. You are a great, role model for from people from different backgrounds and women coming into architecture. Who were your role models when you set off?
Yeah, that's quite interesting. Yeah, because I do feel that kind of awareness of that people look to me as a role model, and I don't always feel that I'm behaving exactly as I would want them to behave, particularly, things like managing my time, all those, doing too many hours, all those kind of things. I think I really struggled actually to find a role model when I came out, and that's probably one of the reasons I got really interested in supporting the next generation, and I got involved in the RIBA. And what was at the time, there was a special interest group for women at the RIBA, and that was just gave me a way of actually just connecting with other women, because I was fortunate that when I came out as a graduate into practice, I did have a female manager, female boss, which was quite unusual, because quite often I was coming out into practice and going, where have all the women gone? There were quite a few at university and they've all disappeared. But she was great, but she did one of those things where she had a baby while I was working for. She was my manager. She literally was back in the office after a week. She came back full time after 2 weeks. Wow. And that's what she wanted to do, and that's what she said. And I remember, being young and naive, going, "What? Why did you do? What? Why are you doing this?" And she said, "Well, I feel this is what I need to do to demonstrate my commitment to the company." And I remember thinking, I just don't want, I don't want that. I'm lucky. I've got a big family. I love family. I knew I wanted to have kids. I was thinking, I just can't imagine wanting to do that, being able to do that. That doesn't seem feasible. There must be another way. And the only kind of role models that I had seen as kind of women who were known and active in practice were ones who were married to their business partners. And that seemed to be a model that worked quite well, in that obviously they were sharing practice, sharing family, managing to distribute the roles so it worked for them. But it was quite hard to find other women who were, just in a big practice in a senior position. So when I got to know a few architects, there were a few people that I went back to again and again to kind of ask advice from. And probably one I should particularly mention is Kate McIntosh, who's quite well known now. She wasn't particularly well known at the time. This was in Winchester, where I grew up. So Winchester happens to have a very good local authority architects, and that's been maintained. A lot of local authorities don't have architects in-house anymore, but Hampshire have maintained that. And Kate had worked for them and then set up her own practice with her husband. And weirdly enough, she had moved into the house I grew up in when I was a child. And I'd met her through my parents and various other things. And she was always very just, supportive and, giving me advice on bits and times and different points in my life. But I think she was really interesting, because I could see that she always just stood her ground, and she was very confident about her own opinions, her own abilities, and that was just really nice to see a woman who was just standing up for herself and felt very happy to say, I don't agree with that, I think we should. And that I found quite hard to find sometimes in practice, like other women who were behaving in that way. And I was lucky enough to meet some really fantastic women architects, fairly early on in their career, like Deborah Sant, who's now got her own practice, Kay Hughes, who was really involved with driving the design for HS2. So, I've kind of, over the years, I've met quite a few people, and I've quite often just kind of forced people to be my mentors. I don't really ask, I just kind of like start calling them and getting to know people. So having that network has been really, really important. There certainly wasn't anybody at the beginning of my career that I felt that's the person I want to be. It was about kind of finding through conversations, networks, luck, people that I felt, that I like what they're doing. I'm going to talk to them. How are they doing that? How can I try and echo that? So I think it has been a mixture of luck and just kind of a bit of being a bit determined.
But people are always very willing to help you. What I've always found is that actually, people are very willing to help because they understand, they've been there and they know what it was like. So they're always want to help in whatever way they can.
Absolutely.
You've also been really heavily involved with REBA as well.
Yeah, so that was, that was really from that search that I had right at the beginning of my career for trying to find some role models and build my own network. So, and find a kind, I guess, just a group of people who were like-minded that I felt comfortable with, that might help me in my career. So I got involved through this Women Architects group. At the time, they were setting up the Jane Drew Prize, which has subsequently been adopted by the Architects Journal as a prize for women architects specifically. So I got involved in that. That was really interesting. We had an exhibition, and it was all very much about collaboration and driving collaboration and rewarding collaboration, because interestingly, Jane Drew's a really interesting character. She was in practice with her husband mid 20th century, very involved with really famous architects like Corbusier, building projects all over the world, and essentially the RIBA Gold Medal, which is the kind of highest award that the RIBA gives out, they awarded it to her husband but not to her, because they said, oh no, it can only go to an individual, even though she had been in practice, she collaborated with her husband the whole time, it was a joint thing. He got the award. And of course, this made quite a few of us a bit cross. Like, this is a bit ridiculous. So this group of women at the time set up the Jane Drew Prize to specifically focus and reward people who weren't kind of addressed by any other architecture awards. So teams, clients, collaboration, all these things which actually really make for good projects. There was nothing that kind of recognised and rewarded them at the time. So we awarded the Jane Drew Prize to Walsall Art Gallery, for example, because they'd done some amazing collaborative processes in delivering their new art gallery, so that it went to the client for the way he delivered that project, as an example. Subsequently, I think that has had an impact. It's been adopted and become a kind of more of a Women Architects Prize, which is great. But since then, the RBA Gold Medal has gone to Barcelona. The whole concept of it can only go to one person. It's just that's gone out the window. It's going to a whole city now. So I think that those kind of conversations have been really interesting as well, in terms of uncovering some of the, not necessarily prejudices, but assumptions and kind of just ways of doing things that need to change. Unconscious bias, some of those things just needed to change in order to open up the profession, open up the industry, and kind of open up the conversation as well.
Just popping in to say, if you are enjoying the conversation so far and want to make sure you keep up to date with other episodes, then please hit follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. Let's jump back into the conversation now. So your practice at the moment, you're with Scott Brownrigg, and that's got quite an interesting blended role. So when you think of an architect, when you're a layperson, you think of people designing buildings and making them look nice and trying to make them as crazy as possible, so people go, oh, look at that. But actually, there's a lot of
there's a lot of other things
that go on.
A lot of other things. Design, I think we would also, if you asked anybody in the practice and probably any architect, they'd probably say design is actually quite a small part of the day-to-day role. It's obviously a really important thing, and you never forget about it. It's always there at the back of your mind. But you may be working on a massive project and your influence is only on a very small area or a very small part of the process. So your design skills might just be applied to, looking at, I don't know, the facade of a building and the performance of that, the aesthetics, the materials, how it's all going to go together. You might be just looking at a really small part of it. And that itself will involve talking to specifiers, talking to contractors, perhaps, it will involve collaborating with other consultants. So many different things that you need to do in terms of managing the design and managing the project. So you don't just get to sit, put your headphones on and draw so much. But, I really like that part of it. I like engaging with people. I like working in teams, which is one of the reasons I like being in a larger practice. The other sort of side of my role is really just about management. So it's I specifically have responsibility for knowledge management in the practice. Some of that is about making sure that we are sharing knowledge with, learning from what's gone before, because we're a very diverse practice. We work in every single sector pretty much. We work in a lot of different countries. We have lots of different studios. We have, people who have come from lots of different backgrounds. So we can't make any assumptions ourselves about what they'll know, how they've been trained, what experience they've had. People are coming from lots of different aspects and understanding. So a lot of it is about making sure information is available consistently to everybody and that they know where to find things, they know who to ask. So that's really interesting because that's kind of just like I've got, fingers in lots of different pies. And then a lot of it is also about compliance. So compliance, is a really big issue for us and becoming bigger on the horizon. So some of that is about our compliance with our own professional standards. Some of that is about compliance with, things like building regulations and, legal requirements. And some of that is about accreditation. So our clients more and more are expecting us to, I'm sure you have the same thing, jumping over more and more. Have you got this certificate? Have you got that certificate? Can you? So I spend a lot of time putting together evidence for various accreditations to make sure we can maintain those. And we've got those kind of industry recognized standards in place. Because, the teams will need them at a moment's notice. You've got to do a bid, you've got to get it in tomorrow. I need the certificate. What do you mean it's out of date? So just keeping an eye on all that, making sure we're maintaining that is really important. So the part I probably enjoy the most is about competency. So particularly looking after the next generation, making sure that, they've got the skills and the knowledge and experience that they need to progress. And looking after making sure my colleagues are also achieving their own goals with whether it's learning, whether it's having particular, opportunities across the practice, whether it's getting involved in initiatives. And we try and do lots of outreach as well, whether that's to school kids or to universities. So all of that side of things, I really enjoy the outreach and the engagement side is something I just do that for fun. Really, it's an excuse to do it in the office. I just do it for fun.
And what makes it what makes it fun? It's really important to have fun.
Yeah, it's totally important to have fun. I think partly because I'm probably naturally quite nosy. I think I like to know what other people are doing. I like to know what motivates people. I think that's really interesting. I like to know about new research and to understand, what's happening on the horizon and to look beyond the surface of things and really get to grips with the bigger picture. I think that's actually something I've always really enjoyed and probably, helped me get involved with things like the RIBA historically, is I want to understand what's the context we're working in. Yes, it's great to have a project. Yes, it's great to kind of have a brief and to talk to a client about what they want to achieve. But what's the background? Why do they want to achieve that? What's the parameters that we're working in? What's the context? How can we make it better? How can we bring in, what perhaps some research perhaps that's happening in a university or some work that somebody else has done on a different project that perhaps this project team don't know about. So I think that's the bit that I find really exciting. It's kind of that, where things meet and where, unexpected, exciting things can happen.
I mean, it sounds like sort of collaboration's at the heart of a lot of what you do. I mean, the industry itself, the built environment is very collaborative. It has to be to get everything, all the different parts moving at the same time. but also that having the thought, well, that could work with that, and we'll put those things together, creates innovation as well. So what do you think it is that makes a good collaboration? What's the sort of essential ingredients?
I think it's quite old-fashioned in some ways, in that I think the key thing is, number one, having some clear kind of roles. So, why are you coming together? What are you bringing to the party? What do you need? So just kind of having a bit of clarity about that. And then also it's about understanding the kind of different strengths that you bring to that collaboration. So, ideally you want to say, well, I can do this and then you could do that, and together we can do this. It's always a bit harder. We collaborate with other architects as well all the time. And that's probably the most tricky bit, because then you're saying, well, which bit of it are you going to do and which bit of it are we going to do? And what are you best at and what are we best? So I think that's probably the hardest bit. But generally, you collaborate because, especially as architects, we know, this is the classic thing, we know a little about a lot. So, we've got a lot of understanding of what everybody else's skills are and what we need, but we absolutely need to collaborate with them. We need that expertise. And it's quite a complex world. Like, building a building is a complex thing these days. So, you do really need to know, actually, this thing here, if we want to deliver it, I need some specialist input on that. I need somebody who knows just about that, who can really help me. So I think partly it happens because, like you said, you have to do it, but partly it's also that thing of making sure we're all clear about our roles and responsibilities as well as what we bring to it.
And you mentioned Grenfell a couple of times. How has that changed sort of attitudes? Has it made everybody much more risk averse?
Yeah, yes and no. So I think if you put behaviour aside, just in terms of, and talk about compliance, it's actually forced us in some ways to think about risk more, because our insurance forces us to. So we all have to have professional liability insurance, PI, and the constraints that have been placed on that PI are quite onerous now for a lot of us, and it's made it quite hard, and the cost's gone up. So it's actually made it, with the best will in the world, it's made it quite hard for architects to actually work in some areas or work on some kinds of projects. I think the other thing that's happened is, because there are new roles now and new legal requirements, it has made some architects kind of shy away perhaps for taking ownership for health and safety, because they think, well, we're going to be challenged in terms of our competency, we're going to be challenged in terms of our insurance. It's not necessarily that we don't want to do it, but we just can't see how we can do it. Yeah. So we'll leave it to somebody else who just does that. So I think it's definitely made people a lot more aware of risk. I don't think it's necessarily made us any more risk averse, but it's made us, again, have to provide that evidence more. So if we are wanting to do things, if we are wanting to work on different types of projects, we're having to produce more and more evidence as to why we are competent to do that. And I think that's really important. And I think, that, we need to do that, and that should be a good thing. And what I hope will come out of that is that companies who aren't competent will have to look elsewhere, and it will help those of us who are competent actually, have a better presence and bring our skills into the industry.
When you look around at the sort of projects you've been involved in, which project are you most proud of having achieved?
So recently I've been working on an international project for the first time. Well, not for the first time, but probably the biggest one for the first time, which is a big new school in Cyprus, on a mountainside in a really challenging climatic environment. That's just been shortlisted for a World Architecture Festival Award. So I'm really proud of that. But I think if I look back in terms of projects I've delivered, some of the school projects, particularly where I had, real chances to engage. And the one I probably talk about the most was a secondary school in Luton. This is going back 10, 15 years ago now, quite a long time. Brand new secondary school in a very, challenged area, deprived area. And one of the things we did, we were really lucky. We got to, the head teacher was amazing. Rachel D'Souza, she's actually now our children's commissioner, and she gave us loads of opportunities to engage with the kids, to do workshops, and it was really fun. I loved that. But also we took a bunch of teenagers into London, and this is Luton. It's half an hour on the train into central London. some of these students had never been to London, and I think it was a real kind of eye-opener to me, realising actually the challenges that how on earth can young people even think about a career in the industry if they haven't even had the opportunity to get on a train and go and see their capital city, which is half an hour away. It just makes you realise that there are so many barriers in the way, and I think huge disparities, and I don't know what became of those young people, whether any of them actually went into the industry, but that's the kind of thing I feel really proud of, that actually maybe it gave, just doing something as simple as that maybe gave one or two of those young people, maybe opened the door to something that they hadn't thought about before. So the buildings are great, but actually it's the but it's the impact. It's the impact that I get excited about.
So if you were going to give a young person advice, they were thinking about architecture but thinking, God, that's going to cost loads of money, it's going to take loads of time, and then am I going to get a job at the end of it, or am I going to be in a recession like Helen was and I'm not going to be able to get a job?
Exactly.
What would you say for them to embrace it?
So I think number one, what I always say, if you're really interested and passionate about the built environment, it's a brilliant profession to go into. And in a way, don't worry about the fact it's going to take you a long time. And it's your life. This is your life. You only have one chance. If you really passionately want to do it, then go for it. The other thing that I say is make a network. Just get out there, make friends. Most of the best jobs I've had, like where I am at Scott Brownrigg, is really been because I had a network. And the third thing is, I said, all experience is good experience. So, and I remember having some really, I've been made redundant in my career. I've worked I worked for companies where I've really been unhappy, and I've been lucky to have mentors around me who've been able to say, this might not be where you want to be now, but always look ahead, always think about what can I get out of this? How can I use this in the future to help me get where I want to be? And also, those times where I couldn't get a job, I worked as a nanny, I worked in shops, I did anything. And that's all been, that's all helped me. I know about what it's like to work in a shop and to be behind a counter and to have to serve people. I know what it's like to have to look after a load of kids on the way from, those kind of things. They will all help you as a designer. So they're all good things that can help you as a designer. And also, especially these days, I'd say there's so many different things that you can do with it and so many different directions you can go. And I get really sad if I meet people. I do quite often meet people who say, oh, I'm a failed architect, because they started and they went, and I said, no, you're an ally. Those skills it's fantastic to have people who've got architectural training working in all other places. I think that's wonderful because, it just helps us as a profession. So I hope nobody ever calls themselves a failed architect.
No, something really
sad
about that, isn't it? Failed anything.
Yeah.
So do you ever not look at things through design eyes? Does it not get really irritating when you're like, you're in a shop and you think, well, if this had been designed better, this would be working a lot. Does that, are you plagued by thoughts of building improvement wherever you go?
Yes, basically, yes. I can't get away from that. And I think the thing where it bothers me the most is probably outside buildings. So it's the spaces in between. Because quite often the buildings themselves will have had some attention. If they're lucky, they will have had an architect. Hopefully they've been put together nicely. They work pretty well. They're okay, they're fine. So the buildings themselves generally are kind of okay. And there's always things you can find that you would do differently and do better. The things I think that really plagues me is the spaces in between, because that's where nobody pays attention. Who has ownership for that bit of pavement outside the building and the space between your building and the building next door, which could be really horrible and unloved and uncared for. And that's the stuff I think can really make a difference to people's experience, actually, because they might not get to come in this building ever in their lives, but they might walk past it every single day and every single day think, it's a bit uneven on this pavement, or the lighting's bad, and if you walk through a nice public space, you notice it's fantastic. People are drawn to nice public spaces. So I think it's the spaces in between, that's the bit that usually really bugs me. So I'm like, why didn't they just do this, and why didn't they realise? And Yeah, and quite often there's like lots of things that, because I'm really interested in inclusion and inclusive design and disability access and things like that, that's where things can really go wrong as well. And you know, for women and girls, there's been some really good guidance coming out recently about how to design for women and girls. And it's usually the public spaces, it's the spaces in between where the barriers exist, and often they might be invisible barriers or not perceived barriers. But you know, you have to kind of put a different lens on, I think, sometimes in public space to approach it differently.
Is there anywhere that's doing it really well?
The place I probably always mention is King's Cross and the development around King's Cross, which I think is really, really interesting. Some great features there. And one of the things I really like about it is the developers recognised that it was going to take a long time, it's going to take years to develop, and they thought about the meanwhile uses, and they thought about the experience of people in that space during the construction. And I was lucky enough to work for BAM, who were one of the contractors involved in it at one point, and worked on site, and it was really exciting to be there and see all the cranes and see everything going on. But they've done a really nice job, particularly in the public space again, partly about creating active frontages. So, you know, there's lots of spaces that look out on the public space. You get lots of light activity, that passive surveillance that helps people feel comfortable and confident. But also they've really thought about families and culture, which is great. So in the summer now, the space outside Granary Square, the big public space, and the space next to the canal is just full of people, absolutely full of people. And there are other huge developments going on in London at the moment, you know, of a similar scale and size, and you walk around there, you see nobody at all. And I know, and that just seems like a massive missed opportunity when you're investing so much money and time and effort into creating these new environments. You've got to think about the impact and the legacy and how you're going to bring life to that space. And I think King's Cross does it really well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's transformed. I mean, I think back 30 years.
Oh yeah, I mean, I used to
it's
cycle through there really fast.
Yeah. It's a no-go area completely,
Yeah.
and now
Yeah.
it's, you know, it's nice from our point of view because, you know, the train from Newcastle goes straight into King's Cross.
Yeah.
You can get off there in
Amazing.
5 minutes. You don't actually feel like you're in central London to a large extent. So outside of work, what do you like to get up to?
So I've got 2 kids, so that both teenagers now. So my daughter's 17, doing her A-levels, thinking about university, all those kind of things. My son's 14, so just starting his GCSE. So they've always, you know, taken up a lot of my time, and I've, you know, and wanting to invest in them and spending time with them. And then I think the other thing that I've always really enjoyed doing is singing.
Oh, right.
So I did a lot when I was a kid, and then kind of fell out of the habit really over the years, and got, actually, interestingly, has got a good Newcastle connection there. So one of my best friends from university, who's also really into singing, she and I are really into the group called the Unthanks, who are a folk group from around here, and they were running singing workshops. So we managed to go a few years ago. We went for her birthday, we managed to get a space on this singing weekend. So this was literally just, you know, 2 days in the whole year where I got to sing. And I thought, I just love this. I've got to find more opportunities to do this. It makes me feel good. You know, I really enjoy it. So I've now managed to find a jazz singing class that I do every week. So very weirdly, where I live in southwest London in Richmond, there's a jazz school. I don't know why. I don't know where that came from. But they happen to have a class on Saturdays that, you know, works well with everything else. So that's the thing that I kind of get a lot of, you know, loads of fun and enjoyment out of doing now is just doing some singing, just, you know, something for myself. And then otherwise, I guess I just like I like getting out. I think that was one of the things that encouraged me to go into architecture in the early days, was the thought that I wouldn't be inside all the time, wouldn't be in an office all the time. I would have a really good reason to be outside or to be traveling or to be going other places. So that's the other thing I still really like doing, going out, and drawing when I have the chance. I still like, you know, doing some sketching if I can manage some.
Is that not a bit of a busman's holiday?
It's a bit of a busman's but yeah, not drawing buildings necessarily. but yeah, that was really nice during lockdown, actually, when we were all, you know, obviously stuck in the house and all working from home. We had a few occasions where, as a practice, we came together online and we all did drawings and shared drawings, and that was a really nice kind of, again, back to basics, just kind of reflecting on where you are, what's around you, sharing that with your colleagues. That was really nice. So we could all kind of get a picture of what each other, the kind of environment that we were all in, and what we were all going through, and the things that were bringing us joy and helping us keep going at that time. So I think drawing's it is still really important to architects to do that and just have that connection. There's something about having a pencil or a pen in your hand and a bit of paper that is so immediate. It's really important.
I think, it's really important, isn't it, to find your joy,
Yeah.
find the things that make you joyful, and keep doing them.
Yeah.
Helen, that's been fascinating. I'm going to look at the world around me in a different way now. I'm going to be looking for accessibility and good public spaces and function and not just form. So thank you for that really enlightening view of your journey through architecture. Thank you. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed that episode of our podcast, Fear Less, Do More. If you did, then please follow or subscribe. If you enjoyed what we talked about in this episode, then you might enjoy this one here, which is also linked in the show notes. Thanks for listening.